A royal wedding night ended in a mysterious death. This is the story of King Louis XVII of France, a young monarch whose triumphant marriage celebration became his final, tragic hour. By the end of this journey, you will uncover the hidden layers of a historical puzzle that has remained unsolved for centuries. Was his sudden demise a carefully plotted assassination, or a shocking twist of fate? We will investigate the secret alliances and the ominous warnings that were ignored. What do you believe is the most dangerous threat to a person in power? He was a boy king, inheriting a crown that was already more of a curse than an honor. Louis XVII of France was not a ruler in the traditional sense, but a pawn in a deadly political game. His entire reign, if one could even call it that, unfolded within the cold, stone walls of the Temple prison. He was the son of the executed Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, and his claim to the throne made him the ultimate symbol of the old regime that the revolutionaries were desperate to erase. The world outside his cell was a cauldron of chaos, the French Revolution tearing apart the very foundations of society. His title was a hollow one, granting him no power, only a name that made him a target. Every day was a struggle for survival under the watchful eyes of his jailers, who were instructed to break his spirit and reshape him into an ordinary citizen. Can you envision the weight on such young shoulders, to bear the name of a dynasty that an entire nation had risen up to destroy? His proposed marriage was not born of romance, but of desperate political calculation. For the royalists who secretly plotted to restore the monarchy, the young king was their greatest asset. A union with a princess from a powerful, stable foreign court was the key. It would provide a military ally to invade France, crush the revolution, and place Louis back on his throne. This marriage was the linchpin of a grand strategy, a single thread of hope meant to pull a kingdom back from the brink of oblivion. For Louis himself, it represented a possible escape from his grim captivity and a return to a life of purpose. The entire plan, however, rested on a knife's edge. If the revolutionaries discovered the plot, it would mean immediate execution for the boy king. He stood on a precipice, his proposed wedding night promising either his glorious restoration or his final, tragic downfall. The air in Paris crackled with a dangerous energy, a mixture of forced celebration and barely concealed fear. For the royalist conspirators, the king's wedding day was the moment they had been planning for, the signal to launch their daring rescue. Elaborate preparations were set in motion, not for a grand cathedral ceremony, but for a secret, somber union within the confines of the Temple prison. The guest list was a carefully curated collection of nobles who had somehow avoided the guillotine, their fine clothes hiding hearts pounding with terror. Every whispered conversation, every glance exchanged, was laden with the unspoken knowledge that they were dancing on the edge of a blade. Can you feel the tension in that room? The stark contrast between the hope of a royal restoration and the ever-present shadow of the prison walls. Rumors of a plot to free the king swirled through the city's back alleys and fashionable salons alike, reaching even the ears of the revolutionary government. This was no secret to them. They allowed the ceremony to proceed, but their permission was a trap. The guards assigned to the temple were doubled, their expressions grim and their instructions clear. They were not there to protect the monarch, but to monitor every move and prevent any escape. Some accounts speak of strange omens that day. A sudden, violent storm was said to have broken over Paris just as the vows were to be exchanged, the thunder echoing like a funeral drum. A cryptic warning, allegedly from a sympathetic guard, was passed to the king's handlers, urging them to call everything off. It was ignored, dismissed as the paranoia of the times. The revolutionaries, for their part, played their part in the grim charade. They permitted a small feast, a cruel mockery of a wedding banquet, all while knowing that the real celebration was a military operation waiting for its cue. The entire day was a performance staged on a precipice, with one side dreaming of a crown and the other preparing a coffin. Every smile was forced, every toast was a lie, and the joyous occasion was, from its very first moment, a tragedy waiting for its final act. The wedding ceremony itself was a quiet, almost furtive affair, held not in a grand chapel, but within a sparsely furnished room of the prison. With only a handful of witnesses present, the young king stood beside his bride. a princess he had likely only just met. The words of the vows were spoken in hushed tones, the air thick with the unspoken fear that their every word was being recorded by the guards just outside the door. There was no cheering crowd, only the solemn silence of a political transaction being finalized. Following the brief ceremony, a small, somber meal was served. This was the wedding feast, a stark contrast to the opulent banquets of the monarchy's past. The food was simple, the conversation guarded. Louis was reportedly quiet, perhaps overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the moment. His last known actions were those of a young man retiring after an emotionally exhausting day. He was escorted from the gathering to his private chamber, a room that offered no real privacy within the prison's walls. He was left there, presumably to sleep, with guards stationed nearby. It was in the deep silence of the night, or in the early hours of the following morning, that the stillness was shattered. A servant or a guard, the accounts conflict on who exactly made the discovery, entered his chamber and found the young king unresponsive in his bed. He was pronounced dead mere hours after his wedding. The immediate aftermath was pure chaos. Conflicting reports began to circulate almost instantly. Some officials declared he had succumbed to a sudden, violent fever. Others whispered of a pre-existing illness that had taken a fatal turn in the night. Yet, there were those who spoke of more sinister possibilities, their voices low and urgent. How could a seemingly healthy young man simply die in his sleep on the most significant night of his life? The official story was being written even as the body grew cold, but the cracks in that story were already beginning to show. His death ignited a firestorm of speculation that has burned for centuries. The official explanation pointed to a sudden, natural illness. Court physicians, under immense pressure, suggested a swift and fatal fever, or perhaps a catastrophic failure of the heart. On the surface, this was plausible. The stress of his captivity and the emotional turmoil of his wedding day could have overwhelmed a constitution weakened by years of poor prison diet and confinement. Yet, this theory crumbles under the slightest scrutiny. Why was there no recorded history of a chronic condition? Why did the illness strike with such perfect, devastating timing on the very night his potential escape threatened the revolution? The convenient nature of his death made the illness narrative feel less like a medical diagnosis and more like a politically expedient story. This leads us directly to the most persistent and compelling theory: assassination by poison. The method would have been silent, untraceable with the science of the era, and devastatingly effective. But who would have administered it? The list of suspects is long and shadowy. The revolutionary government itself stands as the prime candidate. Eliminating the king removed the royalists' living symbol, their very reason for rebellion, and secured the republic's future in one bloody stroke. A loyalist jailer, acting on secret orders, could have easily slipped a toxin into his final meal or drink. Yet, rival royalist factions also had motive. Some conspirators may have believed a martyred king was more valuable to their cause than a living one, a tragic figure whose death could rally international support more powerfully than his shaky reign ever could. Then there are the whispers of a more personal betrayal, a scorned individual from his past or within the conspiracy itself, using the chaos of the wedding to settle a private score under the cover of political murder. The poison theory fits the facts like a glove, explaining the suddenness, the lack of obvious struggle, and the immense political benefit his death provided to his enemies. Of course, history is never without its more outlandish tales. In the absence of clear answers, rumors of a cursed artifact began to spread. Some spoke of a wedding gift, a beautiful but poisoned ring, or a piece of jewelry steeped in a malevolent history that brought a supernatural vengeance upon the young king. Others whispered of a family curse, a divine punishment for the sins of his parents, finally claiming its last victim. While these stories make for gripping drama, they are built on sand. There is no credible evidence, no historical record of such an object being present, and they serve more as a reflection of the profound mystery and the human need to find a pattern, however fantastical, in a senseless tragedy. So we are left with these competing narratives, a puzzle where every piece seems to fit, yet the full picture remains frustratingly unclear. The illness seems too convenient, the poisoning seems too logical, and the curses are simply too improbable. Each theory carries its own compelling weight and its own fatal flaws. The truth of what happened in that locked room died with the king, leaving behind a void filled by suspicion, political necessity, and legend. How do we ever find the truth when the crime scene itself was controlled by the most likely suspects? That single night in the temple prison sealed a fate that would ripple through history. Louis XVII lived his entire life as a symbol, first of a fallen monarchy and then of a lost cause. His death, arriving at the precise moment it could cause the most political damage, transformed him from a pawn into a permanent enigma. The precarious position he occupied, a king without a crown trapped between warring factions, made his survival untenable. His tragic end on his wedding night did more than just extinguish a young life. It extinguished the most potent rallying point for the Royalist rebellion. The power vacuum his death created was immediate and profound. With no clear royal heir to unite behind, the Royalist cause fractured and lost momentum, allowing the revolutionary government to consolidate its power and steer France further away from a monarchy. The mystery of his death became a weapon, a story told and retold to serve different masters. For the Republic, it was a convenient end to a dangerous problem. For the monarchists, it was a martyrdom that fueled generations of nostalgic legend. We are left, then, with the same question that has haunted historians for over 2 centuries. Do you believe the official story of a sudden, tragic illness, or does the chilling logic of a political assassination, a silent poisoning in the dark, feel more true to the brutal realities of that time? Perhaps you have a different theory entirely about what truly happened in that locked room. The clues are all here, laid out in the echoes of history. We want to hear what you think. Share your verdict in the comments below. And if you are captivated by history's greatest unsolved cases, subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries that time forgot.